A 12-year-old boy walked alone down 4th Street in Chickasha, Oklahoma, just after 11 at night on January 2, 2026. He was wearing a red and black plaid shirt, dark jeans, and steel-toe boots. He didn't have a phone. He didn't have a friend with him. He had been living in a Quality Inn with his mother and his stepfather because, they said, their house in cement couldn't fit everybody when it came time for showers. He vanished off that corner, and for the next 9 days, every cop, every dog, every drone, and every volunteer in Caddo County tried to find him. They were too late by years. You're watching 405 After Dark. Tonight, the case of Ryan Davis Jr., the boy they called RJ, a child who, according to court documents, had been chained, stabbed, tased, beaten with a nightstick, and shocked with an electric cattle prod inside his own home for half his life. A child who tried to escape on his own twice and was driven back to his abusers by the police. This is the story of how a small town nearly lost him, and the story of how the system that was supposed to protect him kept handing him back. RJ Davis was 12 years old, 4'11", 85 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes. He went by RJ, and on some paperwork he went by Riker Cole. His biological father, Robbie Lee Frederick Jr., said later he hadn't been allowed to see his own son in 8 years. The household RJ lived in belonged to his mother, Kimberly Cole, age 33, and her husband, George Franklin Cole Jr., age 43. According to a sworn protective order filed January 5th in Caddo County by RJ's step-grandaunt, Tina Molina, the abuse in that house started around 2020, 6 years before he disappeared. Molina swore under oath that she had personally seen shackles on RJ's ankles. She said RJ had run to her home on foot on more than one occasion, fleeing his stepfather. She called the police, and the police took him back. That is where this story actually begins, not with a missing child poster, with a child the system already knew was in trouble and chose not to save. By the morning of January 3rd, the Chickasha Police Department had filed RJ as missing. On January 6th, Oklahoma Highway Patrol upgraded it to an endangered missing advisory. On January 7th, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation officially called the case suspicious, took over the lead, and went to the Cole property in Cement with search warrants. That same day, Kimberly Cole was booked into the Caddo County Jail on child abuse and crime against nature complaints. Hours later, George Cole Jr. walked into the same jail wearing the same handcuffs.
The next morning, OSBI agent Hunter McKee stood at a podium and said the words that everyone in Caddo County had been waiting for. He confirmed there had been, quote, apparent harm done to this child. He said OSBI believed RJ was still alive. And Chickasha Police Chief Gobel Music made a promise on camera. He said, RJ is safe, he is sound, and we stand by our promise. He will not go back to that property. Kimberly Cole spoke to a KCO reporter that same day. She said on camera, I just want my son back. We need him back. She had been in a jail cell for less than 12 hours. For 3 more days, the search expanded. OSBI offered a $5,000 reward. Drones flew over the corridor between Chickasha and Cement, 24 miles of rural Oklahoma. Cadaver dogs worked Lake Birchie. Thermal imaging crews drove the back roads at night. A candlelight vigil drew more than 100 people. RJ's biological father, the one who hadn't seen him in 8 years, showed up to the search. He told reporters George Cole had once threatened him directly. And then, on January 11th, just before noon, 2 volunteers from a Texas nonprofit called the United Cajun Navy walked up on a makeshift shelter on a property close to the Coles' land. They found RJ inside. He was alive. The first thing he said, according to the volunteers, was that it wasn't his fault. OSBI took him out of that shelter, covered him with a sheet, and walked him through the parking lot of the Quality Inn, the last place anyone had seen him alive, and into an ambulance. The community lining that parking lot applauded. McKee told reporters, "He's doing well. We're still processing him. Medical staff is still looking at him. From what we've been able to tell so far, he is doing great." He was placed in Oklahoma DHS custody that afternoon. The police chief's promise held. RJ was not going back to that property. But the case was not over. It was about to get worse. The next day, January 12th, George Cole Jr. made his first appearance before a Caddo County Special District Judge. Bond was set at $2.5 million. The judge ordered no contact with minors, no weapons, GPS monitoring if he ever bonded out, no contact with animals or witnesses. Within hours of that hearing, back in his cell, George Cole tried to hang himself. He was transported to a hospital in critical condition. OSBI opened a separate investigation into the suicide attempt.
The charges that came out over the following days were the kind of charges that make detectives stop talking in interviews. According to court filings reported by Blaze Media and KTUL, George Cole Jr. was charged with 14 felony counts, including child abuse, child sexual abuse, conspiracy, and crimes against nature. The affidavit alleged he had bound RJ with zip ties and handcuffs, stabbed him, tased him, beaten him with a nightstick, and used an electric cattle prod on him. Kimberly Cole was charged with 11 felony counts of her own: 3 counts of child abuse, 2 counts of child sexual abuse, 3 counts of child neglect, 1 count of conspiracy, and 2 counts of crime against nature. The court file is sealed at the Caddo County Courthouse. The district attorney prosecuting both cases is Jason Hicks, District 6. George Cole Jr. never woke up. On January 16th, doctors confirmed he had no brain activity. Days later, the state took him off life support, and he was pronounced dead. He never answered a single charge in open court. He never sat for an interview. He never gave RJ an apology. He died in a hospital bed, in state custody, with 14 unanswered felonies on his name, and a boy he had tortured for 6 years, still alive, on the other side of Caddo County. That left Kimberly Cole. The case now turns entirely on her, on what she knew, on what she did, and on what she allowed to happen inside that house. Now we have to talk about the part of this story that nobody in law enforcement wants to talk about. RJ Davis tried to save himself. He ran from that house, on foot, to the only relative he trusted, Tina Molina. Molina called the police. Officers came, talked to the parents, and put RJ back in the car, back in the house, back with the cattle prod and the zip ties and the nightstick. Department of Human Services, multiple police visits, a step-grandaunt screaming for somebody to listen, a neighbor who said the child never went to school, a father who hadn't been allowed to see him in 8 years. Every red flag this system is supposed to catch, caught, looked at, and waved through. That is the systemic failure inside this case. The Chickasha Police Department made the promise that RJ wouldn't go back to that property on January 8, 2026. They could have made that same promise in 2020. They could have made it the first time he ran. They could have made it the second time. By the time they got around to making it, 12-year-old RJ had been tased and stabbed and chained in his own home for the better part of 6 years. A child shouldn't have to disappear from a Quality Inn parking lot for the system to notice he exists. As of recording, Kimberly Cole remains in the Caddo County Jail. George Cole Jr. is dead. The arrest affidavits remain sealed by court order. Kimberly is expected back in court in mid-April 2026. The trial schedule, plea posture, and ultimate disposition have not been made public as of the date of this episode. RJ Davis remains in Oklahoma DHS custody, away from his mother. He is, as far as the state of Oklahoma is concerned, finally safe. His step-grandaunt Tina Molina filed her protective order on January 5th, 3 days into the search. The judge granted it. 3 days after that, the police chief made his promise. Days after that, the United Cajun Navy walked up on the shed where RJ was hiding. Days after that, George Cole was brain-dead in a hospital bed. If any one of those things had happened in 2020 when the first call came in, RJ Davis would not have spent 6 years being tortured in his own home. And George Cole Jr. would have answered for it in a courtroom, not in a coroner's report. Sources for this episode include the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the Office of District Attorney Jason Hicks, the Caddo County District Court, KOKH, Fox 25, KTUL, ABC News, Blaze Media, KFOR, and direct statements from the United Cajun Navy. Full source links are in the description. If you have information about ongoing abuse cases in your community, call the National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4A-CHILD. If a child tells you they're being hurt, believe them the first time. You're watching 405 After Dark. Every state, every story, every victim.